Hello, this is Dale, and I'm joined by Mike Jones. Hello, Mike Jones.
Hey, Dale Matthews.
We're we're going to do a show tonight where we're going to talk about elevator speeches, the kind of thing that you need to know. You probably know most of these things already, but the kind of thing that you need to know when someone comes up to you and they say, I really like that Cheryl Walker. Why, she's just a wonderful person. And you might say, well, I'm very happy for you. However, there's a couple little things you might want to know about her. Keith Heck is a perfect example. Simon Hare for some people. Okay? And you know that Mike and I come from originally from different sides of the aisle. I mean, he doesn't care too much for Bill Maher, and I don't care too much for Rush Limbaugh. And so, thanks. He's my prime audience at the moment. And so, but people do invite us over to their parties. They invite us to, there's no cost, okay? They no
That
more than,
usually happens once, by the way.
oh no, we've been a couple of times, or their group meetings, and Mike especially is available for children's parties. Mommy, what is eminent domain? I mean, we can come and help entertain you, and just as we do on the show. And one of the things that the bad guys, I get to call them the bad guys, see, because it's partly my show. One of the things that they cannot tolerate, they don't understand, they cannot counter, is just a little sense of humor at uh, at their expense. They can't do that. And so when you go after Obama like this guy does, and when you come after us like this guy does, one of the effective countermeasures is just to laugh a little bit at them. But keep it with this guy. The reason he's pointing at me in particular here is I chuckled, and you can't even hear it on their audio. I simply chuckled, and he got all over my case. You'll have to leave this room if you chortle. Isn't that what he said, Mike?
Yes, chortling. Chortling. Who says that? Chortle.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I ever have chortled, but okay.
Well, speaking of chortling, I'd like to do a little chortling before we get started with this evening, about the Daily Courier. Woohoo!
Oh,
And
yes.
and we told you about this Mark Van Holly fiasco thing, and how the commissioners had just they were really such lunkheads, and they're backing off of that now. Okay, I think because so many people came to this meeting and said, "Really, what do you think that you're doing?" Well, in the Courier, Jim Moore wrote an article, and the title of the article was, look at my notes, County Tables Recruitment Deal Was So Ready. Mike, tell them what's wrong with that headline.
Well, you know what, and it's funny because Dale is always riding the back of Jim Moore and flogging the Courier whatever latest inaccuracy there is, or omission. I mean, it's omission really more often than anything else. But this thing here, they got it so totally wrong. It's like, if you're going to do a story about something, probably one of the most required prerequisites is get the name right, and this had nothing to do with So Ready. Now, it's in the same general ballpark as So Ready, economic development, but this is Mark Von Holly, a wholly owned subsidiary of Mark Von Holly, not So Ready.
So it's on the front page. It's bylined by Jim Moore, and it says County Tables Recruitment Deal Was So Ready. That was the highlight. That was the best part about the article. The worst part to me of the article was at the end they had a summary paragraph, and I have to look at my notes because I want to get it word for word. Commission Chair Keith Heck, okay, so far all right, didn't address the agreement. Yes, he did. So Jim Moore's writing that he didn't address the agreement. Yes, he did. But he did admonish people. He did admonish people who had referred to Von Holly as a scam artist. Mike, you want to take that one? There's three parts to that. First, Commission Chair Heck didn't address the agreement. Mike is going to speak in a moment, so I'll speak instead. Commission Chair Heck didn't address the agreement. Yes, he did. But he did admonish people. He admonished, he got on the case specifically of Cheryl Walker. And he said to Cheryl, who had made a statement about Von Holly, she had said something like, Arizona, we're used to seeing scams like this, but she didn't call him a scam artist. But it was Cheryl Walker he got on her case. So here's what you need as citizens who read the Courier. You need to have your news filtered. It needs to be happy and soft. And let's take out references that are negative to commissioners, and let's put in references like, oh, people and everybody, and let's just try to, and instead of talking about Mark Von Holly by name, we'll pretend like he's part of So Ready. Something may be wrong with Mike's microphone. Mike, can you hear me, buddy?
Yes, I can hear you. I can. We had our first. Listen, we've been doing this show since the 1st of January, and we had our first inadvertent disconnect that we've had. So far, I'm liking the software that we use to make this show happen. It's fairly reliable, considering. And no, we just had our first major.
Okay, all right. So anyway, look, I don't want anybody to be thinking that we're all over the commissioners all the time for absolutely no reason, and don't they do anything right. Look, you've got Tricia that's over in the clerk's office. She's a wonderful person. You've got Scott Chansey, who you heard me talk about, in transit, a wonderful person. You've got 1 out of 3 county commissioner secretaries who's a wonderful person, and the other 2 are well, there's a word for it, but I don't like using that word. But let's just say they're not very pleasant. When somebody thinks that they're intimidated because you filled out a request for information, this is a bit of a problem. And one of my favorite times is I go in to look for a document, and it's sitting right there on the table between me and the secretary. And she says, well, we'll have to do a research fee. Okay, a regular human being might say, Dale, really, I don't need to research. It says right here, bud. But we need to charge this. That's okay. No, we'll need to research it. And I said, it's right here. Yeah, well, we got to research this. And she was belligerent about it. I don't like that kind of stuff. So anyway.
Yeah, and that's what happens when they've targeted you as a disturber. And they're going to impede you at every turn. And, government isn't supposed to do that because this, giving up of the documents is part of transparency, and they should be, I think you're already paying for that. The idea that you should somehow pay a research fee or a fee even for the paper to print it up. I'm paying my taxes. Give me the document.
Where does Terry Wharton get her? Oh, they hate that. Don't mention people by name. Where does Terry Wharton get her salary?
Right. No, it's a public thing, but also, I want to use a plumber's term, but they use a term that something flows downhill, and payday is on Friday, and the reference here is that the attitude or the tone is set from the top down. And if you are the boss and you say, listen, I want you to deal respectfully with citizens, and when they come in and request a document, for crying out loud, give it to them with a smile on your face. That's what happens when you are a decent steward of the office there, and that's what happens when you're a public servant. And what you get when the opposite is in charge is what Dale is describing here. So.
It's not just happened to me, it's happened to all kinds of people. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about your what do you do when someone comes up to you? I'll give you another example. I've had people say to me, well, you know, that county clerk, that Art Harvey, he's a prince of a guy. I mean, he's such a funny, happy guy, and boy, he certainly is competent. For me, the breaking point came when, and you've heard me mention this before,
Oh,
but
oh my God. Okay, I'm going to turn my audio off here
oh
now, so
no,
I'll have to listen to this
no.
story
Okay. It
again.
was that thing about the 180-degree turn at the end of the hallway to measure something from one distance to another when it didn't even matter how far away it was based on this 180-degree turn he did to measure something, because you're not even supposed to do this in the building. But
Right.
but but more to the point is, people would say, lots of people still say, you know, that Gil Gilbertson, boy, he was a constitutional sheriff. Yeah, but what about the emergency operations plan that he approved? First he said he knew about it, then he didn't know about it, then he didn't know. It says right in there that if you have property that he needs, that he can come and just take it, and he doesn't even need to leave you a note. What kind of constitutional sheriff is that?
Yeah, no, it isn't, and it's convenient to say, yeah, I didn't really know that was in there, or to make some other excuse about it. What a constitutional sheriff would do, in my book, is as soon as you're aware that that is in there, if this is something that has snuck under your awareness, as soon as you do become aware of it, you go, well, let's take that out of there right now.
But his first reaction was to deny that he even knew about it.
Yeah. Well, my little eye-opening came with Gil Gilbertson, because I used to I used to do the audio at the SOS meetings, and uh, Gil would sometimes come in early. He'd be sitting in there by himself. We'd start having a conversation, and I could tell, okay, we're connecting on one particular level. Then somebody from local government would come in, and the tone would change instantaneously. You know how that happens? Like the guy that you think is your best friend is talking to you in a certain way, but when somebody else comes, all of a sudden he doesn't know who you are. Okay, this is the kind of thing that happened with Gil Gilbertson, and so then I started looking at him in a different way, and those little things started popping up more and more, and you know. And
Well,
listen, I'm not telling you that Gil Gilbertson is a bad guy. What I'm saying is, when you send my antenna up, then my antenna is not going to go back in my head after that. I'm gonna keep my eyes open.
I felt as if I was a friend of his when he first took office. And one of the first things that happened when he was in office, and this is going back a ways, I know this, but it colored my idea of him in the future. And Dave Toller, not very many people's favorite guy, decided to have a press conference. Okay, for some of you, you're going to go, this is a little repetitious. Don't forget, some people are just joining us, not just on this show, but I mean, they're relatively new to the area. They don't know the whole history. The fact that I've been doing this now for more than a decade doesn't mean that everybody has. And so, anyway, so Dave Toller decided to have a press conference inside the little back room. Okay, and that was the thing where Art Harvey was saying, "Oh, that's far enough away from the ballot box." No, it's not. You can't even do it in the building. So it was a joint press conference with the sheriff. The sheriff later said, well, it really wasn't. Gil, your name is on there. You're sitting right next to Dave Toller. And Dave Toller held up pictures of candidates he didn't want you to vote for. Really? An elected official? 2 elected officials? There were 5 elected officials that said, don't vote for these people. Really? In the courthouse when people have the ballots in their hands? Really? That's bad enough. But Dave said, oh, I never did that. We got a picture of him doing it. Okay, the only person disputing this is Rika Brown. His fingers don't look right. Oh, Rika, get out. Okay, so anyway,
Yeah.
she was there and she saw him doing
Yes,
it.
but
That's just loony. Okay, so
yeah, it's
that's
like
when you know it's
chemtrails.
true. Yeah, well, yeah. I saw smoke coming out of the end of his fingers.
Yes.
And so Gil later, the county legal counsel was there, not our current good guy. At least I hope he's a good guy. But all of their responses when the Secretary of State said, "Did you do this?" County Legal Counsel's answer and Gil Gilbertson's answer and Dave Toller's answer, they all matched. Really? Are they alike politically? Did you know that they were? Because they all said, oh, nothing happened. This was a press conference where nothing happened. This was a press conference where pictures were held up but no candidates were referenced. This was a press conference that took place illegally inside the building, but nobody did anything or said anything. They handed out a press release saying, don't vote for these people, mentioning them by name, but no candidates were referenced. See, that's the point at which I said to Gil, Gil, that's not truthful. Now, you may say, oh, well, he was always truthful with me. Yeah, but how many examples like that do you need before you go, well, that makes me stop and think for a second.
Right. Yes. If someone will lie to you or lie to someone else, they'll just as easily lie to you, and people ought to make that connection.
Okay, so here's the challenge to Mike Jones. All right, Mike's really looking forward to this challenge. Okay, you don't have to phrase it as a question. So,
okay.
So somebody comes up to you and they say, yeah, I don't think too much of those other two commissioners, but that Cheryl Walker, boy, she's really wonderful, isn't she? I mean, okay, the sneaky review, the sneak preview says, oh, Cheryl Walker's the best commissioner we've ever had, and it's, and everybody loves her. And I remember the lady from the Democrat Party, 2/3 of the county just love Cheryl Walker and think she's the best ever. So somebody comes up to you, Mike, and they say, what's your problem with Cheryl Walker? I think she's wonderful. And you might say, well, good for you. However, did you know?
That's what I would say, being polite in public. If I met somebody at Home Depot and they came up to me and said that, I'd say, oh, that's really nice. I got to go find the PVC I'm looking for.
Right. So, but they say, no, really, tell me a little bit. Why would you possibly say anything ever negative about such a wonderful lady?
How long do you have?
Okay, we're going to talk about 3 commissioners. We're not going to talk about Rob.
Oh no, I'm hoping you're not. I'm joking, really. I have a list of things, somewhere back in my brain that reasons why I wouldn't any longer trust Cheryl Walker, and if it were my choice, I would have somebody else sitting in her chair.
Okay, and give me one reason why. And people in the audience, some of them might say, "Oh, I don't think she's
junk
so
ordinances."
bad." Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing. Let's see here. The tyrannical-like treatment that she gave Dale and other dissenters when right after she became chair. There's something about just becoming chair that just brings that out of somebody. If it's inside, if it's behind their eyeballs, it comes out.
Well, what do you mean tyrannical treatment?
Oh, like you need to have your hand on your camera all the time. You need to sit in one particular place or the other. Your tripod can't be there. Just crazy rules that were designed really to get rid of Dale. And the whole idea. There's always, with this particular board, had been an animosity towards Dale or to anybody who isn't coming in and saying positive things.
They've said that many times, and in addition to not to being that way, she was quoting rules that don't exist. And do you remember she stopped the meeting and called the police? You remember when Oath Keepers came in, and one of the things that they do sometimes, if they choose to, is when one of them speaks, they all stand up silently. They're just standing up silently. They're not blocking anyone's view. They were mostly in the back of the room. And she says, you must sit down because people can't see. And I'm looking around, and, really, there wasn't anyone's view that was blocked. Nobody. She didn't like them standing up. And they were just quietly standing, and she actually stopped the entire meeting.
Yeah, and then she had listed sycophantic Democrats to come in and defend her on that, and that tweaked me a little bit too. It's like,
well, as our audience, did you realize that there are a couple of times that Josephine County has figured in national news since most of us have been around? And one of the times, obviously, was that 911 call where the lady was told, well, no one's coming, and that made national news. There was another one that got some national effect. And this was with Dwight Ellis. Oh, not Dwight Ellis. I like that Dwight Ellis. Okay, so I'm at a meeting. I've alluded to this before. I'm at a meeting, and I get up and I start to read from a transcript of what the commissioner said at the last meeting. And Dwight Ellis said, I'm not going to allow you to repeat what we said at the last meeting. Really? Why not? Well, because that might be denigrating. How can it be denigrating if it's your words? And I didn't say, here's another stupid thing that they said. I was just reading the words, and he stopped us. So here's what I did. Yeah, I did this all by myself. What I did was I went home and I Googled most conservative constitutional scholars. And Barack Obama did not come up, but several other people did. And so I sent out emails to all 5 of those people. And one of them was Ronald Reagan's lawyer representative to the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
And they responded very negatively, and they used Keith Heck's name, not Keith Heck, Dwight Ellis's name, and said, this should not be allowed. This is America. These are constitutional scholars who are from pretty much the far right, buddy. And they said, this is absolutely wrong. Well, the reaction in the Courier was really different. Some people said, what a brave Keith Heck. Brave? Oh, and I like the fact that he's stopping people from screaming out obscenities. Screaming out obscenity. I was reading from a transcript from the last. If there were any obscenities, and there were none, 1, I wouldn't say them, and 2, they would have been from them because it was their transcript.
Right.
So this is how it got interpreted in the Daily. Are you still reading the Daily Courier? This is how it got interpreted in the Daily Courier, that this is awful and it must come to a screeching halt. Instead, and then what he did the next week, because Sherry Adkins, hello, Sherry Adkins, was also giving him advice, he decided to cut off the camera. So every time a citizen got up to say something, they could say it, but he would cut off the camera to cable TV people. So what would happen is someone would get up and they say, well, you know, I don't quite agree with you, because, or you know, I really like what you're saying, because, or, you know, Mr. Dwight Ellis, I think that you're right, and he did that for a while.
Wow.
Now,
yeah,
this is our wonderful Dwight Ellis. So when you see me or Mike occasionally saying something a little negative about the commissioners or about a person like Rob Brandes, who apparently directed his people to change the license plates before the investigators came, you might ask, now why would Rob Brandes ask them to do that? Or why would Cheryl Walker quote me, I'm quoting Mr. Matthews here, quote, you know, we're such lunkheads, or whatever it was she said, end quote. I never said that. But it's gotten down to the point where they can't catch us saying something stupid, so they're making up the quotes to amuse themselves. We don't do that. We can't do that, because the good guys can only base it on what's on the videotape. And still, like Keith Heck, you might use this one, Mike, going on to Keith, they still try to say it never happened. Remember the thing with Keith?
Yes, and well, you know what's funny? In all of these cases, they usually have some people that come in the next couple of weeks. I don't know if they get an email, some kind of a note or something to say, come in and defend so-and-so. It's usually somebody who's never, ever there. And they characterize what goes on in the meetings, like, you know, cussing and yelling and screaming and, as Dale always says, gnawing on the furniture. That, of course, never happens, but why would you trust this person who never, ever comes to the meeting to tell you what goes on at the meeting?
Well, that's what Mark Gatlin did. When I said that thing about Rob Brandes and changing the plates, Mark Gatlin got up right after I did and said, that's insane, and that's scurrilous, which means, you know, potty-mouthed. It wasn't potty-mouthed. It's scurrilous and insane. Well, you know, I asked him afterwards, I said, Mark, you haven't even seen the tape, have you? How would you know that it's insane? It did happen. And as I often say, your argument is with an inanimate piece of plastic and metal. It did happen. We've got it on tape. But as the Democrat Party headquarters said, so.
Yeah, and in the case of Keith Heck, there's a really boneheaded move on his part, and instead of just saying, "Yeah, that was a stupid thing I said," he decides that he's going to say, "I didn't say that. You took my words out of context. You highly edited the tape to put words in my mouth. Blah 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 blah." And then, of course, we put up the tape with him speaking on it, and then we put up their recording, and then we ran them both on top of each other at the same time. Exactly the same thing. So these guys should not forget that somebody is watching them all the time, and this somebody is perfectly objective.
Right, because the somebody is, well, if it's, yeah, right, it's called a Sony camera, and they're still living in the past where they could say, well, I never said that. You can't say that now. We have you saying it on tape. And so the question to you would be, because there's got to be people out there saying, well, I kind of like that. Keith's like, how can this guy hold his head up in public? How can he walk into a meeting of the Board of County Commissioners and even look up to see people? Because some of those people are thinking, what lie is he going to say today? Because he actually tried to get out of it, and he used county resources to try to enlist others to say that he never said this.
And yeah, but I'll tell you why he doesn't suffer from that problem. One thing is that generally speaking, people that run for office have huge egos and are pretty arrogant, and that's part of the issue. The other part of the issue is that there aren't enough people that are engaged. There's maybe 10 people that really understand what happened in that situation, and then some others that were enlightened by the video, but the bottom line is we need more and more and more people to be engaged here, because if we're going to pick people, if we're going to put Dale Matthews out of business and save the economy of Josephine County, we're going to have to start electing people who do a better job than these guys.
Did you know that he actually physically attacked me after all that? Physically attacked me. I hadn't said anything to him at all, but he actually physically attacked me and then lied to the police about it. And I pointed it out, and people were like, oh, well, that's interesting. He physically attacked you. He did, because he was so upset. And he was yelling, I know we're breaking the law, and I don't care. Really? Yes. Now, how do you live with that? How do you overlook? Well, let's overlook that because he's always been nice to me. Hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is a county commissioner. In any other place in the whole country, that would be some kind of news. Well, where was it?
You know what? And it's a weird psychological thing that happens. I think that people think that if this story wasn't in the newspaper, well, then it didn't happen. Or, I mean, they have to wait for a wave to come, and so they can get caught up on the wave in order to believe something, or to, I mean, it takes courage. It really does. It really does take courage to buck the system when you're the only guy doing it. Or if there's one or two or three of you, it really takes courage to do that. But anybody can jump on a wave. Oh yeah, everybody's doing it. Yeah, let's all do it. It doesn't matter if it's jumping off of a cliff. It's very easy to do if you're following everybody else.
Well, the good part about this interpretation of it didn't happen if it's not in the Courier is that means we never did have a $100,000 plus cost overrun on the Deming Tower. Because there was absolutely nothing, not even a hint about that in the Courier.
And they really are reconsidering the proposed contract with SoReady too.
Right. Which they wrote that's what they were doing, and Jim Moore had written it, had changed it. The guy had taken the contract from saying contact to target contacting. Jim Moore from the Courier rewrote that, even as bad as that was, to will actually contact. No, It says will target contacting. Jim Moore wrote it as will actually contact, so you can go back to sleep. Don't worry about the commissioners doing lunkheaded things. Jim Moore has rewritten your history for you. Jim Moore.
And it makes me wonder, how does this happen? Is this a conscious thing where he goes, well, hey, the So Ready people and the Mark von Hollies of the world, these are my friends? Or is it the commissioners that are friends of his that send him a press release 2 days ahead of time, ahead of what they're going to do, and let him know so he doesn't really even have to show up to the meeting, and then he just writes it all down the way he wants it to be? And I mean, is that what happens, or
It doesn't matter. It
it's
doesn't
just a
matter.
stupid mistake?
The reason it doesn't matter is because, okay, to me, there's a difference between misinformation, which means you're misinformed, you just don't know, and disinformation, which means you do know, but you're not telling the truth. Okay?
Right.
I believe that there are a number of cases, like leaving out the thing about the cost overrun. There was a cost overrun. Simon Hare admitted it on tape that there was a cost overrun. The reason it's not in the Courier is because they don't want it to be in the Courier. And if you're going to forget about KJO, it's never going to be there. These two guys show up at these meetings acting like they're reporters, and then they walk out, and they were obviously at a different meeting than we were at. And so you have, there's only one place you can go and hear what's actually happening, and you don't need to take my word for it, and sure don't take Mike's word for it. You can look on videotape and see it for yourself. Now, what are they actually saying? Now, if you're going to look at that tape, some of you do, and you say, I still don't hear it, well, we can't help you.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But, this is one thing that plagues my mind all the time. And
I was wondering what that was.
Maybe it doesn't bother other people. But I can't help looking at these, misinformation, disinformation, and go and wonder about the motivation. Why is this taking place? Is this person stupid, or is this person complicit? And it has to be one of the two, or maybe they're worried about access. Maybe they're worried if they say things that the commissioners find to be offensive in some way, or not supportive or negative, that they will no longer be able to get an interview with these guys if they call them on the phone.
Well, it comes down to something as soft-edged as softening up the news. Okay, so I believe in real wood tables with the knots in them. I think you can live through that. You're going to be okay. Obviously, Jim Moore believes in plastic tabletops that look like wood, because what he's done is, I'm fond of analogies, you wouldn't know that. No. What he did was he took a thing where Keith Heck was addressing Cheryl Walker, and she had said something about this being a scam. It's pretty tough words. And he had said, well, we don't need this kind of thing about calling someone a scam artist, and she responded, that's not what I said this other thing. Okay, so they were back and forth about a little bit. So your filtered version of the news, because you're not watching it live, is written by Jim Moore, who changes that by typing that up. This is typing. He changes that into that that Keith Heck had admonished people about. Now, wait a minute. Really, does it really come down to that we can't even say who he was admonishing? Really?
Yeah, but you know what's weird about that? Because there's the kind of a parallel in the national news here. So here is Keith Heck. He is basically having an argument with Cheryl Walker.
Yes.
About Mark von Holly, and don't call him a scam artist. And she's saying that, well, we've seen these kind of scams before. So that is an argument amongst them. These are two government officials. They're having
not right about that. Oh, never.
Just having this little argument, but instead, Keith Heck is admonishing people, which means citizens.
Yes.
Okay. Now, here's the parallel going on right now. The most dangerous terrorists, the most dangerous threats to our country right now are right-wing homegrown terrorists. And Dale's going, oh my God, what are you talking about? No, what it is that, here's the people that you're supposed to be talking about over here, and but wait a minute, look at these guys over here, who aren't doing anything, by the way, And so here we are. You and I are the homegrown terrorists in this scenario. You like that?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now. Yeah. Well, I wasn't feeling like I was, but I probably
Yeah.
am.
Well,
How
yeah.
often?
Yes, but
Well,
that's how you're perceived in many cases.
I
You're
thought
you're
where you were
the
going to go is how the president of the United States is very reluctant to refer to anyone as Islamic extremists. We
yeah,
all know what they are, but let's call them by another name. So if you're going to read the Courier, just keep in mind, one, you're not going to hear some stories at all. And I don't mean stupid little stories, but you're not going to hear those stories because the Courier, Jim Moore especially, does not want to tell you about those things. So if you
right.
don't want to know about cost overruns and you live in a happy, happy land where there are no cost overruns, why, read the Courier by all means. Because they'll put an article on the front page, one of my very favorites, Dog Licks Ice Cream Cone. Woohoo! What a wonderful
Yeah,
community that we live in. All right, so
that's
you
me,
can live
baby.
that way if that's what you want. Okay, I would assume because you're watching this that, and you probably sometimes watch this, but you mostly watch this, that you would prefer to have some of your news straight, but sometimes it's not happy. The $600,000 that they spent on software is going bust. And
Yeah.
now, are we going to see anything at all in the Courier about that story? Not so far.
Boy, I don't see how that they can get around it. I think they're gonna have to say something about it because that is too large. That occupied a fair amount of space when it happened, and it's certainly
$100,000 wasn't big enough.
yeah. But you know what? I mean, this is a failure on a whole other level than that was. This is a complete failure. This is utter failure. They I remember when this happened in what was it, mid 2013. They rationalized this. They made it sound very, it's totally logical.
It had an effect on the vote for the 2013 levy.
Right. No, it did. But you know what? I mean, they did a pretty good job of making it seem like it was totally rational, and this is something that we have to do. And you know what? We're not going to be doing this all the time. It's a one-time thing. Blah 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 blah. Well, that was 2 years ago, and now the whole thing is poof.
Well,
So
also this thing about, well, it's a one-time deal plus $60,000 every year in payments to that company plus $60,000 guy hired. Now think about
right.
that. Just to keep it running, that's $120,000 every year. And when you add that up to, well, we can hope that the software would last longer than 5 years. Right there is another $600,000.
Don't worry, Dale. It's in the budget.
It is. They keep saying that the magical, magical budget.
Okay. All right. Now, you wouldn't think there's another shoe to drop after total failure, but there is another shoe to drop. What are they going to replace this with? And how much is that going to cost?